Northeast Romania, 1987. My hometown, Moinești, sat in a deep depression between two hills that stood like silent giants. From above, it looked like the earth had taken a breath and never let it go, a place cradled by silence and shadow. The hills weren't just landscape. They were a presence. They watched. They whispered. They held secrets in their folds, and sometimes they let one slip. The wind between them didn't howl, it murmured, like it was trying to remember something. As a kid, I wandered constantly. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was just listening. The trees spoke in rustles. The grass hummed. Even the stones felt like they had stories to tell. One summer afternoon when I was 5, I vanished. No plan, no path. Just the pull of the wind and the whisper of the trees. I remember the moment I stepped off the trail. The wind changed. It felt sharp, like it had teeth. I followed it without knowing why. The sun was high, but the shadows didn't just move. They watched. I didn't come back until 7 that evening. By then, my parents had searched every trail, every shadow. My name had been shouted into the valley, reported to the authorities. The town was holding its breath. And then, I appeared. My father saw me first, walking down the slope with my hands behind my back, like nothing had happened. But I saw it in his eyes. The fear, the disbelief. He didn't know if I was real or just a trick of the dusk. He didn't ask where I'd been. He just held me. But his hands trembled, and his eyes looked at me like I'd come back wrong. I had no memory of the miles I'd walked, only a kid that had nothing to do with the summer sun and a faint sweet smell on my palms like frozen river water. I had vanished, and somehow, I came back changed. Even from that age, I was intrigued. The hills whispered, the stories lingered. But one legend stayed louder than the rest, the tale of the haunting groom. It wasn't a cautionary tale, it was a curse. Long ago, a wedding party rode out in celebration, sleighs gliding over the frozen surface of Lake Tarnița, our local heart of ice. Music filled the air, laughter rang out like broken glass, until the ice shrieked. The lake swallowed them whole. The bride's white gown, the horse's frantic hooves, the violin's mid-tune. The legend says Tarnița is bottomless, that even now you can hear the tangled, desperate music during the day and the screams at night. But what terrified me most wasn't the screams. It was the music. It was a celebration that had drowned. The townsfolk had their own chorus of fear. Never go to the lake alone. Never stay past dusk. The lake doesn't just drown you, it keeps you. My grandmother used to press her icy fingers into my arm and whisper that the immortal groom was still choosing a bride. But the stories varied. Some said the groom still waits, dressed in black, holding a frozen bouquet. Others said the bride sings lullabies beneath the ice, hoping someone will answer. Children claimed they saw sleigh tracks in the snow where no sleigh had passed. One man swore he heard a violin playing underwater. The most unnerving were the stories about the swimmers. A few who dared to plunge into the lake's black, cold water claimed they felt hands, a sudden fierce grip around their ankles, a pull like a dead weight trying to drag them down. I was logical, or at least I tried to be. Cramps, I told myself. Panic. The most common problem swimmers face when their leg seize up and they get stranded. Water is just water. Physics and fatigue, not ghosts. But the chill of that story, the idea of a final, desperate clutch from the dark beneath, it stayed with me. It didn't scare me away. It simply gave the legend a tangible, physical edge, and slowly the obsession grew. I started sketching sleighs in the margins of my notebooks. I hummed songs I didn't know. I stared at puddles, waiting for them to ripple. I asked questions no one wanted to answer. At 14, the pull of the hills became the siren song of the lake. I didn't feel like I had to do the trip. I knew it. I was going alone. I intended to stay past dusk. The obsession was a fever. I needed to know if the legend was true, or if it was simply waiting for a second wedding party. I grabbed the barest things, told no one. And like I had as a 5-year-old, I simply walked toward the deepest shadow I knew. The ice-black heart of Lake Tarnița. The descent. It was summer, just like the time I disappeared when I was 5. But now I was older. 16, to be more precise. The hills hadn't changed. The wind still whispered through the trees. But I had changed. I wasn't just wandering anymore. I was answering something. The pull toward Lake Tarnița wasn't sudden. It had been building for years, like a hum beneath my skin. That day I didn't pack much. I didn't tell anyone, just like before. I walked the same paths I had vanished through as a child. The grass was taller now, the trees older. But the silence was exactly the same. The birds I expected to hear, they were rare too, like they were scared of something. The air felt watched. On my way, I passed a few people cutting grass on their land. They nodded, barely looked up. It was the season to gather feed for the horses. Winter always comes early in the hills. Their scythes moved slow, steady, like they were trying not to disturb whatever lingered beneath the silence, and one of them did look my way. He waved for me to stop, so I did. He walked over, wiping sweat from his brow, and asked, "Where are you going alone?" Not much provision for a trip, nor for camping. Then he paused. His voice dropped. "Are you going where I think you're going?" Calmly, I replied, "I don't know what you were thinking, but where I'm going is the lake." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he asked me to open my palm. I didn't know what to expect, but I did what he asked. He dropped a piece of dark polished wood into my hand, a flute, handcrafted, smooth and cold. He closed my fingers over it. "If the silence grows too loud," he whispered, "blow a noise. Any noise. Blow it until you hear the echo of a living thing. Then turn back. I'll be here for you," he added. The knowledge in his eyes was worse than any legend. Fear and curiosity crashed in my chest. A silent, frantic part of me wanted to hand the pipe back and run, but the deeper, colder part, the part that had walked home from the hills at age 5, held tight to the wood. So I nodded, out of respect or disbelief. I don't even know. But off I went, keeping the trail. The fight with myself was a distraction I couldn't afford. I veered off the path. The trees here weren't just dense, they were a wall. The air went still, heavy, and the daylight that filtered through was a sickly, underwater green. My sense of direction didn't just fade, it began to circle, mocking me. I had lost the trail completely. This is it, I thought. This is how the hills claim you. I dropped to the ground, heart racing, breath shallow, the sudden disorientation proving the townsfolk right. I checked my backpack. I was looking for the garlic I'd brought, out of fear of the stirigoi. They say they confuse you, get you lost, lead you to your end. And that thought kicked in hard. I could feel it crawling through my mind, a cold, logical certainty that the forest was intentionally steering me wrong. I guess the fear was real. Can't say the same about the stirigoi. But back then, everything felt real, especially the feeling of being led. It was 09:30 in the morning. The fear was growing in me, not loud but steady, like a tide. But somewhere in the back of my mind, something else was trying to make its way through. It wasn't hope. It was a cold, soothing voice, a sound that felt like it came from the ground itself. It kept whispering in my ear, "Hey, you should be fine. It's just morning. There's nothing to fear. Keep going. You know you want to see the lake. Ignore your fear for now. It's fake." That whisper felt dangerously tense. It didn't feel like my voice. It felt like a lure. But I stood up anyway. I looked at my watch, the old one my father gave me for my birthday. Small, round, red metallic casing, 8 rubies. It was a Soviet thing, Pobeda, victory, and I spoke the name in my mind. I didn't love it because it was fancy. I loved it because it felt like a promise of command over my time, but I think I'm missing the point. I got distracted. Let me get back to the story. The only thing that mattered was the time. I had wasted nearly 1 hour fighting the confusion. I had to move. I kept walking, trying to find the path, trying to stay clear of where the forest wanted me to go. That's how I explained it to myself, and even to this day I don't know how to explain it differently. I didn't have a compass. But I remembered something from geography class: how to find north using magnetism. I made a puddle, floated a leaf, placed a safety pin on top. It turned slightly to the right. That was north, and I knew home was south. For one dizzying second I saw my father waiting. I saw the relief of turning back. Then I thought of the haunting Groom. I thought of the music beneath the ice. I put the pin away, ignored the magnetic pull of home, and walked north again. I didn't even check the time. From what I remember, I just kept going. Then something. A weird sound came from the direction I was heading, north. It wasn't music, it wasn't scary either. It sounded like someone humming, a strange tune, or maybe mocking something. A voice, but not quite. That's when I thought, I'm not alone. And that feeling gave me strength, courage, even a flicker of excitement. Maybe I'd meet someone. Maybe I'd no longer feel haunted by ghosts or that creeping sense that the forest wanted me lost. Then, silence again. But up ahead between the trees I saw something like a spark. It wasn't fire, it was the sun, shining on the lake. A glimpse of light flickering through the branches. I knew instantly. That was the lake. Lake Tarnița sat in a small clearing, carved out of the dense forest like a secret kept too long. And that sight, it revived my sense of time. I checked my watch. It was around 11 in the morning. A strange ease suddenly washed over me. I made it, I whispered to myself. It was beautiful. Nature had built something that felt like art, like it wanted to impress. No wonder that wedding party had chosen this place. I imagined it in winter, a magic place, frozen and gleaming like a dream. Now, in summer, it felt like heaven. And for a moment, I thought it was a distortion, my mind playing tricks on me. But it wasn't fake, not a Fata Morgana moment. It was real. The retreat and the echoes. I stood at the edge of the clearing. The air here was heavy, scented with damp earth and something metallic, like old pennies. The surface of Tarnița was undisturbed, a mirror reflecting the pale sky, impossibly quiet. It didn't look bottomless, it looked like a black hole that swallowed light. The water was terrifyingly clear near the edge, then turned to a black mirror that grew darker and darker the deeper it went, promising nothing but endless, cold depth. I scanned the shoreline, expecting to find some artifact from the event past. The wedding. A shard of glass, a frozen piece of lace, anything. There was nothing. The lake had swallowed them whole and completely. Then the humming returned. This time it was louder, closer, seeming to rise right out of the water, a deep, resonant pitch that resonated in my teeth. It wasn't music, and it wasn't a scream, but it carried a cold promise. The immortality wasn't in the Groom, it was in the water itself. Suddenly the strange ease vanished. It was replaced by the same raw, paralyzing fear my father had carried in his eyes years ago. I thought of the flute in my pocket, the warning of the old man. I hadn't made a noise to summon a living thing, but I had heard the lake's noise. I knew the rule, then turned back. But the true trigger wasn't the sound. It was much simpler. Just behind me, a scary crack ripped through the silence, a dry branch snapping under a heavy weight. Simultaneously, a very slight, unnatural gust of wind slipped through the trees, a cold breath that had my hair on my arms standing up. It wasn't the forest moving, it was the forest noticing. I didn't turn to look, I ran. I didn't run home, not yet. I just ran south, retracing my steps from the magnetic north I'd found earlier. The urgency was a raw, animal instinct. The trees still pressed in, but they weren't circling me now. They were watching me go. I had been moving for maybe an hour, finally feeling that the shadow-green air of the deep forest was thinning when I heard it. Footsteps behind me. They weren't the erratic sounds of an animal or the familiar crack of a dry branch. They were the measured, heavy tread of boots on the soft forest floor, following my exact rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. My first rational thought was the old man. He had said, "I'll be here for you." I stopped and called out, "Hello? Is that you?" Silence. Only the thumping of my own heart. I started walking again. Thump, thump, thump. The steps started immediately, keeping pace. I walked faster. They kept pace. I stopped dead. They stopped dead. This wasn't confusion or a trick of the Styrigoi. This was a presence. Whatever was behind me didn't want me lost. It wanted to stay close. I froze, heart pounding against my ribs, convinced that if I turned, I would see the wet, celebratory face of the haunting Groom. I remembered the one specific warning I hadn't been able to dismiss, the chilling story of the hands, the final, desperate clutch from the dark beneath. I didn't turn. I started to run. Not home, not south, just away. The steps behind me felt like they were catching up, growing louder, heavier. Something in me kept pushing, but my mind was shutting down. My heart was beating in my neck. My vision was dimming, not from dusk, but from dread. It was still daytime, but in that never-ending forest it felt like night. Then I heard it, a soft voice from ahead of me. "Keep running." "Did you use the flute I gave you yet?" I heard it. I told myself, I know it's him. But a part of me was in denial, still fighting my thoughts. That's when I yelled out loud, "No!" out of despair, out of fear. And then I failed. Tired, depleted. My body wanted to keep going, but I had no energy left. I made peace with the idea. I whispered to myself, "I'm done." And I hoped it would be fast. No pain. I laid down and waited for the end to come. I felt the cold earth press against my face. Then, a sudden deep heat spread across my skin. Not just warmth, but life. I turned my blurred vision toward the sensation. A familiar shadow loomed, and then I saw his face, the old man, his eyes steady and clear. He looked at me and whispered in my ear, "I told you I'll be here for you." I fainted. When I woke, the world was swaying gently. I was lying in the bed of his old horse-drawn cart, bundled beneath a thick blanket. The sky above me was pale. Morning was losing its grip. I opened my eyes, looked up, and saw him, silhouetted against the light, watching me. He asked, "What did you see? What did you hear? And what do you remember from what I told you in the morning?" The return and the residue. It's been years since that day, but the old man's words still live in me as if it happened yesterday. I don't remember everything he said, but the memory of his voice is fresh, slow, steady, like each syllable had weight. He spoke not just to me, but to something older inside me. He only asked those 3 questions, like a final judgment. I tried to answer, I really did, but the words felt too small. I said something like, "I saw the lake, I heard the humming, I remembered the flute." But he just nodded, like he already knew. Then he said something I'll never forget. "The lake doesn't choose the brave. It chooses the ones who listen." And I've tried to listen ever since. He told me silence isn't empty. It's full of questions, full of warnings, full of voices we're not trained to hear. He said, "If the silence grows too loud, blow a noise. Any noise. Blow it until you hear the echo of a living thing." I never blew the flute, but I still carry it. It's not just wood. It's a silence I survived, a sound I never summoned, a choice I still carry. At first, it felt like protection, a charm against the forest, a promise from the old man. I kept it close, wrapped in cloth, hidden in my drawer. I never touched it unless the wind outside sounded too much like humming. But over time, it changed. It became heavier, not physically but symbolically, like it had absorbed everything I didn't say, every fear I didn't name, every echo I didn't chase. Sometimes I hold it in my hand and wonder, what would have happened if I had blown it? Would the forest have answered? Would the lake have let me go sooner? Or would something else have come? Something older? Something waiting. I've dreamed of blowing it. In those dreams, the sound is thin at first, then impossibly loud. It shakes the trees, it wakes the water, and something rises. But I never blow it in waking life, because the flute isn't just a tool, it's a threshold, and I'm not ready to cross it. Still, I carry it, not out of fear, not out of duty, but because it reminds me that I chose silence and survived it. It reminds me that I listened. And that's what the old man said, isn't it? The lake doesn't choose the brave, it chooses the ones who listen. So I listen. And when the silence grows too loud, I don't blow the flute. I just hold it. And I wait for the echo. I'll be here for you. He said it once, but it echoes every time I feel lost. Every time the silence grows too loud. Every time I walk into a place that feels like it's watching me. His wisdom didn't save me from the lake. It saved me from myself. He disappeared after that day. I never caught up with him to offer my thanks. But I know he's still out there somewhere. I still have the flute he gave me. A dark piece of polished wood. That much is real. To this day, I think it was him, the haunting groom.